Morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's edition of the NBC Markets Morning Call. It is the 15th of May, Friday. It was chip stocks in China overnight. So we had President Trump meeting President Xi in China. Trump saying extremely positive and constructive discussions, called Xi a friend. He invited Xi to visit the US in September. He offered to help on Iran if he can be any help at all, but they pledged no military equipment to Iran, which was a big statement, and they agreed to buy 200 Boeing jets, but it was well below the 500 expected. And there was a bit of a nuance, but the Chinese, knowing what Trump's like in releasing and trying to dominate the overall narrative at press conferences, etc., actually released a press release before the meeting. And they warned Taiwan as a very important issue and mishandling could be in dangerous, which was emphasized. So, look, I mean, that really takes the wind out of the sails of President Trump's normal tactics, where essentially he throws something out there and then blames the other party for not coming to the table. So pretty smart move there from the Chinese, and they know their enemy. Well, not enemy, obviously friend, but they know they know who they're dealing with. US cleared H200 NVIDIA chips to 10 Chinese firms. NVIDIA was up obviously 4.5% on that, near a $6 trillion market cap. Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, said the chip news was news to him. And look, we had Cisco hit all-time highs. SK Hynix is approaching 1 trillion. And then, TSMC said a few comments which were really positive for them as well, which is why we've seen that those chip stocks broadly head up a little bit higher. We are starting to see, as you can see there on the left-hand side, Micron probably running out a little bit of steam, and SK Hynix as well. I would imagine, being what has been described from the boffins in the technical analysis world as the most overbought stock in history in terms of RSI, that they're starting to cool a little bit. So, so overall, we've had a pretty positive week, and that despite the fact that we had fairly hot inflation numbers on the CPI, we had very hot inflation numbers on the PPI, which lags about 2% overall. 2 months usually overall. And we had a strong payrolls number, but that's skewed by migration. The weakest consumer sentiment number in the history of recording those since 1952. So, for the week, we've still got that American market really positive. The Aussie market probably did pretty well to survive, being only down 1.19% in the last 5 sessions overall, just on the basis that, CBA's had issues this week. The budget's been extraordinarily unfavourable, and really now it is encouraging people to probably sell their long holding, their long-standing stocks. But I mean, I wouldn't call this an outstanding performance from the US market. If anything, we've been taking a few profits this week. We trimmed Micron a couple of days ago after like a 80% return in 6 weeks on our Global Alpha recommendation service. And look, we're starting to and we've trimmed some CrowdStrike as well. Look, if we go back to this market map, you can sort of see the CrowdStrike and things is, they're in that sort of software part of the curve here over the heat map here on the left-hand side. They have just been on fire as well. I mean, since we did the SaaSpocalypse, Software Survivors strategy back in March, we've seen both the two cybersecurity names that we selected for that strategy are now up around about the 45% mark each, or thereabouts. I think Palo Alto's higher. They're both broken to record highs, and that strategy, because we paired them up and used leverage, is up in excess of 230%. So, if you've got any interest in those structured investments, obviously just go to the website. But on really high conviction stuff like that, we do tend to use these strategies, and it's a really nice way to use a little bit of leverage and cap your risk. A bit all over the shop in terms of crude, obviously up this week, but still above $100. Silver took a bit of a hit last night, but there's talk around China and Russia are buying at record levels in terms of a monthly basis. Gold drifted off down a little bit for the week. Silver's still remaining up. Copper is kind of on fire as well. Don't really give that copper rally enough credit. Like I think that, copper overall, that year last year where it was up around about 45%, that in terms of the volatility generally historically, that's as good as the move in silver or platinum last year, which were, triple, they were 150% plus, because, copper just doesn't have those sorts of, historically doesn't have those sorts of rallies. I fully expected that move will continue. But look, it's a really short one today, people. Overall, look, subscribe to our Bulls versus Bears podcast. Myself, Kai Chen, Jonathan Takadina, is the team here at MPC Markets. You can subscribe at MPC Markets on either Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube, and you get these every week. And it's sort of our broader, more in-depth look at the market. We have a little bit of fun. It's not very stuffy, and pretty easy listen overall. But this week's episode 119 is GPUs, TPUs, and CPUs rocket higher on IOUs. So we're just looking at the backlog and the fact that these stocks have rallied enormously on on stuff that hasn't necessarily been delivered yet, and particularly when you're talking about GPUs, that circular financing deal that Nvidia tends to do with everyone, which is almost like vendor finance. We're just going to have a bit more of an in-depth look at that this week, and just check some of the numbers. So if you want to find out about that, obviously you can check our socials, or you can subscribe on our YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, and go from there. Just another point as well, I wrote an article for livewiremarkets.com earlier this week on the budget. It seems to have been received relatively well, from most people. I've copped a fair bit of crap from some people, but it's basically just around trying to, not necessarily, and for the record, and this is where I copped a lot of hate. I'm not a fan of the new tax rules and policies, etc. That is not the point of the article. The point of the article is that many of you out there, and particularly older investors, will hold, I've probably been holding stocks for the wrong reasons for a long period of time, that, worried about capital gains, blah, 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 blah. So, now's a really good opportunity just to hit the reset button and look at new strategies, look at things like, our structured investments, for instance, or, look at alternative investments. Like those of you holding the big four banks, CBA and Macquarie are categorically the clear better performers. There's probably a lot of people that 10 years ago should have, switched out, paid their capital gains back then, and they would be miles better off just being in a better investment. So, it's around that. There's some actionable ideas in there. Just go to livewiremarkets.com and you can find me on there, and you can subscribe to my articles there as well, and sort of get them up to date, get them when they come out. And Livewire Markets is a great site, essentially, for, good in-depth, content around financial markets, etc., and Aussie investing. There's some pretty good, pretty solid guys out there to do a lot of media with, that have got great opinions. So, don't just take my word for things. You should always be looking at other opinions. Believe you me, I definitely do not have all the answers. So, look, hopefully, if have a listen to Bulls versus Bears. Otherwise, have a great weekend, people, and we will speak again on Monday.
Feeling lost with investing? Meet Mosaic. Mosaic is MPC Markets' platform that turns confusing markets into clear, actionable guidance for your portfolio. Discover Mosaic today. Portfolio and trade ideas in one place for clients and subscribers, powered by MPC Markets.